Welcome to By the Numbers, where we deep dive into every base class of Dungeons & Dragons 2024, or D&D 5.5 if you will. In each base class, we're going to go through all the features and see numerically how they might add to our damage, control, durability, or even our mental resistance. We've taken a look at the Barbarian. Today is the Fighter. It's iconic and lets you have that really great Swordmaster aesthetic, which is something I love. Let's take a look here and see how it stacks up. So first we're going to look at all the features, and then we're going to look at a build from 2024 versus 2014. See how it's improved, or maybe how it has gotten worse. And then we'll start our tier ranking based on criteria. Right now, we only have the Barbarian and the Fighter, but we're going to get to all of them. So let's start analyzing. At level 1, we're going to start with Fighting Style. This is the same as in 2014, except now they're feats, which gives some slight difference, but essentially we pick a fighting style and become better at that. I'm going to go through all the options and we're going to see just how much damage or defense we get from that. First up is Archery Style. This gives a +2 to ranged attack rolls. It was a go-to in 2014, but in 2024, it's significantly less good. The reason is because the Sharpshooter feat is very different. It doesn't give you the Power Shot option to take a -5 to your attack and get a +10 to your damage. So people would often offset that -5 to attack with this +2 from the Archery feat. It makes it feel less bad. For all of these at the damage analysis, I'm going to take a level 5 fighter, just because. We're going to see how much damage they add per round. Okay, I'll take a look at two range styles here. First one is Longbow, and we take Great Weapon Master with it, which does work because it has the heavy property. The boost we gain from the accuracy is 2.1. I do want to note that Great Weapon Master can't boost our dex, it only boosts strength. So we miss out on that here. On the other hand, if we take Crossbow Expert, we can get an extra attack in, and that would give us an extra 2.25 damage per round. Very close. Dueling gives you a +2 damage when you're dealing a weapon in one hand and no weapon in the other hand, so usually a sword and a shield. But since 2-weapon fighting doesn't require you to have the other hand with a weapon, now you can juggle and 2-weapon fight with one hand, so you could get dueling and 2-weapon fighting at the same time. I do also want to note, some people apply this to thrown weapons as well, since they're just in one hand, maybe? So if we did a longsword, and we did our dueling style, we would gain 2.6 damage per round at level 5. 2-weapon fighting lets you add your stat modifier to the attack and damage roll on your offhand weapons. This will apply to those extra attacks gained from the Nick property, and the extra attacks gained from the dual wielder feat. It's a pretty solid pick. If we had 2 daggers, attack twice with our attack action, once with our Nick, and once with our dual wielder, we would, without any fighting styles, deal 12.2 damage. If we grabbed the 2-weapon fighting style, we would add our ability modifier to 2 more of those attacks. So that brings it up to 17.4. So in total, the 2-weapon fighting feat is giving us 5.2 more damage. This is exactly twice as much as dueling, and we have 2 times as many attacks. It seems like a lot, and it is, but if you're 2-weapon fighting, you're going to need this bump. So pick this. And if you're sword and board and you don't want to juggle, just be happy you get more defense, I guess. Next one is thrown weapon fighting, and this is similar to dueling in that it gives you a +2 to damage on your thrown weapons. This actually ends up identical to 2-weapon fighting right now. So instead of stabbing twice with both hands, we threw twice with both hands. We would again deal 12.2 damage without the fighting style and 17.4 with the fighting style. This means it's also 5.2 damage per round increase, like 2-weapon fighting. Personally, I'd rather take 2-weapon fighting because if you stab or throw, you can still get that damage bump. The last fighting style that boosts our damage output is Great Weapon Fighter. This boosts those that have the heavy property and 2-handed, so like our Great Axe, Great Sword. The problem with it in 2014 is it didn't boost our damage by a lot. And actually in 2024, they made it even worse. I mean a little bit. Let's take a look. The way it works is when you roll damage, if you roll a 1 or a 2, it counts as a 3. It's a slight difference from the rule in 2014, whereas if you rolled a 1 or a 2, you would re-roll it. First, let's talk about dice. If you take a d6, the average result you get is 3.5. So if we re-roll a dice, no matter what it was before, it turns into 3.5 as that average. So a d6 averages out to 4.17. It's just slightly higher than 3.5. So if we use a greatsword, which is 2d6, we double it and it turns into 8.33 instead of the average of 7. In the new version, instead, it just turns into a 3. So we get 3, 3, 3, 4, 5, 6. That averages out to 4. And then if we double it, it turns into 8. So on average, our greatsword is going to deal 8 damage, which is less than 8.33. It's even worse if you use D12s, but essentially it's not a lot of damage either way, and it's even worse now. I get that there's no reroll, so it's maybe faster, but whatever. If we take a look at the average DPR gain from it, it's 0.6. Yikes. You may as well just take something else. The last damaging fighting style we get is unarmed fighting style. And this lets you use your unarmed strikes with a D6 or a D8 if you have no weapon or shield in the other hand. And if you have someone grappled, you can deal 1d4 damage to them at the beginning of your turn. It's pretty niche, and if you are doing unarmed fighting as a fighter, you'll need this. Otherwise, you just can't do any damage. So I'm not going to count that as a damage boost. But I will say the grappling one will give you an extra 2.5 damage per round. And that seems pretty in line with the rest of the fighting styles. The ones that really gain the most are from 2-weapon fighting, and that's because they get so many attacks. But if you take out those ones and you take out great weapon fighting on the other end, they all are about 2.5, which is kind of nice. Okay, let's take a look at the defensive fighting styles now. First is defense. That gives you a +1 to your AC. Always good and just passive. The next one is interception. It lets you use your reaction to jump in the way of another attack and block some of that damage. So you block a D10 plus your proficiency bonus. You can use it with a shield or a weapon. Note that you can't do it to yourself. Last one is protection, and this one has had the biggest change out of all the fighting styles. It's very close to interception in that when an incoming attack hits someone within 5 feet of you, you can use your reaction to potentially block that attack. What it does is it gives disadvantage to that attack, and now to every attack roll against that target for the rest of the round until the start of your next turn. That is quite good. Compared to 2014, it was just disadvantage on that one attack. Since monsters get more attacks as you level up, it became kind of obsolete. Now, if you have a monster with 5 attacks, you can give a disadvantage on all those attacks, and against any other monster that is going to attack that person too. It's pretty good. Let's take a look at how all of these stack up, at how much damage they will prevent at all tiers of play. Let's start with defense. If we're a defensive character, we're probably going to have an 18 AC at level 1. That's chainmail plus a shield. This boosts it to a 19, so the damage we take goes down from 4.6 to 3.9, so we prevent 0.7 damage per round. This continues on until at level 17, we're preventing 6.7 damage per round. They're not massive numbers, but the fact that you don't need to expend any resources to do this, and it happens at any point in combat, it's pretty good. It's also the only one that you can use to defend yourself. Okay, the next one is interception. This one's pretty obvious. A D10 averaged out to 5.5 plus your proficiency bonus across the tiers. So we prevent 7.5 damage at level 1, and at level 17 we can prevent 11.5 damage. Considering that monsters can deal a lot of damage at level 17, blocking 11.5 of it feels like it's not going to contribute too much. But if you don't have anything else to do with your reaction, it's something. The last one is protection, and this depends on our allies' AC. I'm going to assume they're weaker than us, so I'm going to say 16 AC here. If they have just one enemy attacking them, they would take on average 4.4 damage per round. If we give the enemy disadvantage, the ally will only take 1.7 damage, so we prevented 2.8 damage per round using our reaction. This continues until level 17, where we prevent 19.6 damage per round. Interception is going to be better at levels 1 to 5-ish. Then it switches to protection, which brings up a point I haven't mentioned yet. Now, fighters can switch out their fighting style every time they gain a feat, and fighters gain a lot of feats. So what I would say is you can swap them out at level 4. The last fighting style here is blind fighting. This gives you a 10-foot radius blind sight. It's a fantastic choice. It doesn't directly increase your offense or defense, so I don't have any calculations for it, but it's a all-around solid choice. Okay, let's move on to Second Wind. This is another classic fighter feature from 2014. You can use a bonus action to heal yourself 1d10 plus your fighter level in HP. It used to get it back on just a short or long rest. Now you have 2, and you get 1 back on short rests. So you'll always have more than in 2014. But it also scales now, so you get additional 1 and eventually max out at 4. Let's take a look at this chart comparing how much HP you heal from Second Wind versus how much damage you would take from one enemy attacking you. At level 1, we heal about 146% of the damage that we would take. So Second Wind is really good at level 1. As we continue onward, it heals less and less, but we do get more uses. At the end, it heals on average 22.5 damage, and that's about 40% of what an enemy is going to deal to you in one turn. So it's never a massive heal option, but it is an emergency heal. A lot of people use this outside of combat, and that makes sense to me. The last level 1 feature we get is Weapon Mastery. Take a look at this video here where I go over all of them and how they might combo, but I think pretty much all of them are good for a fighter. I would say Graze is more useful on a fighter because we get so many attacks, but we could also skip Graze and do a lot of really good control options. Now, fighters are supposed to be the weapon master, so we start with 3 at level 1 and we go all the way up to 6. Plus, we're going to get features later that let us do weapon masteries even easier. At level 2, fighters get Action Surge. This lets you just take another action, and you can use it to attack, and if you have extra attack, you can do that again too. So if you have 3 attacks, Action Surge turns into 6 attacks. It's pretty fun. The only real difference here is that in 2014, you could use it to do any action. And it actually ended up working better for casters to have Action Surge, so they can cast multiple spells in one turn. Now in 2024, you cannot use it to do the magic action. So that would be activate a magic item or cast spells. Now they can't appropriate the fighter's feature and use it better than them. The damage we gain from Action Surge goes up as we level because we get that better attack action. If we have a 4-round encounter and we Action Surge 1 time to double our attacks, we gain 1.45 DPR at level 2. At level 20, it's about a 9 DPR gain. It can be fantastic for Nova, but in terms of a 4-round encounter, it's not actually contributing that much. Also, at level 2, fighters get a new feature called Tactical Mind. It gives you a new way to use your second wind outside of combat to boost your skills or ability checks. When you fail an ability check, you can expend a second wind and you can roll a d10 and add that to your check result. Note that you have to fail it. That means you can't add it to initiative checks because you can't really fail initiative checks. The great thing though is that if you still fail after adding in your second wind, that second wind is not expended. That is always great, and me as a player, I would feel a lot better about spending second winds to do this as opposed to before. I think that last addition is vital to the feature, because otherwise I wouldn't use it as a player. There are some potential in-combat uses we have for it. Something like escaping grapples, but we could even use it on something like dispel magic checks, which are ability checks. So if you are a wizard fighter, you can use that. I'm sure there's a lot of other cool uses we could think of, but I don't know off the top of my head. Let me know if you can think of anything else interesting. Why don't we compare how good our skill use is versus a rogue, who is the skill monkey. At level 5, we actually are more likely to succeed than the rogue, so that's pretty significant. Rogues are gonna get way better than us later, but at least right now, we're a little bit better and pretty comparable. So I think people will actually use Tactical Mind and feel good about it. Okay, at level 3 we get subclass, but we're not going to discuss them in this video. We'll have to wait for the subclass series. At level 4 we get our first feat, first of many. And because fighters are so versatile, almost every feat in the game can apply to them, it feels like. Here are probably the more stereotypical picks. Dual Wielder, Great Weapon Master, Polearm Master, Crossbow Expert, Grappler, Shield Master. This one is great for sword and board builds. You can push or knock someone over every turn for free. That feels great. But you can also negate any damage you take from dex saves if you can save against them. If only there was some other feature fighters got that would make them auto-save things. Crusher, Slasher, these ones are always good for adding some control. For defensive feats, we can take Heavy Armor Master, and this basically gives you damage resistance. Defensive Duelist, this lets you add your proficiency bonus to your AC for the round. Sentinel, really great for tanking, especially if you have that push mastery. And Mage Slayer. Mage Slayer now basically gives you a legendary resistance, and that pairs well with anybody. So take your pick. And note that every general feat in 2024 gives you a stat bump as well. So we can actually fit a lot more niche feats into our build and boost up our stats that way as opposed to manually putting them up. Moving on to level 5, we get our first extra attack. We also get a new feature called Tactical Shift. When we use our bonus action to do our second wind, we can then move up to half our speed without provoking opportunity attacks. Note that we have to use our bonus action, so if we use our second wind to boost a skill check, we don't get this feature. But it definitely could be helpful, where we do a little bit of positioning, escape some OAs, or we could use it to maximize our speed for one turn. We move, dash, action surge, dash again, and then bonus action to Tactical Shift. That's 105 feet in one turn. Not bad. But probably will use it as a bonus action disengage most of the time. Alright, at level 6 and 8, we get more feats. Fighters are great for that. At level 9, we get this new feature called Tactical Master. This is where fighters are better than everyone else in weapon mastery. I'm going to read this word for word because it's important. When you attack with a weapon whose mastery property you can replace that property with the push, sap, or slow property for that attack. Note that it's the attack and not for when you hit. So before you even roll, you'll have to decide which mastery to use. Often we don't want to use the weapon mastery for the weapon we're currently holding. For example, maybe it's just not useful right now. You don't want to push them. Or maybe you've already used that mastery, such as the Nick weapon mastery. So using it again doesn't help. What you do is instead of attacking twice with that Nick, you attack once with it, and then you swap it into a slow mastery. So you can do something else to them. The big problem I see with this is that you can already do that by weapon juggling, which is in the rules. So you attack with that Nick weapon, stow it, and pull out an actual slow weapon. But now you can do the same thing without stowing and drawing it. So is it just to make it feel better? It can help when you don't have enough attacks to make that final swap. So it can definitely help ease or bridge the weapon juggling, but it's not like it's adding completely new functionality. The other issue I have is that it doesn't work with graze. I wish this was when you hit, because then it would be very useful for fighters. You attack with a graze weapon, and then if you hit, you swap it into a push weapon. If you miss, you keep it as a graze weapon. It feels very nice that way. Yes, it can be useful if you know you have advantage on the attack. You can swap out the graze with something else because you're pretty likely to hit. So there's that. I think though the real use of this is that you have a +3 longsword and you don't want a weapon juggle because you want that +3. So then you swap it out with other masteries instead of what it normally is. So do you think it's a good feature? The second feature you get at level 9 is Indomitable. And this one is new and improved. It is really good. Indomitable, when you fail a saving throw, you can re-roll it, and now you can add your fighter's level to that. So now when we fail against mind control, we can re-roll it and add 9 to that. That means we're really likely to succeed. But how much more likely are we to succeed? Well, let's say we have a +1 to our wisdom, which is honestly all we can afford. Our chance to pass a level appropriate DC at this point is 30%. But with Indomitable, that changes to a 75%. That is a huge jump. But we do get to roll first and then see if we fail. So if we combine them, that turns into an 82.5% chance to succeed. It's really good. We only have one use right now, but that does increase to 2 and to 3 at level 13 and 17. And at those levels, it turns into an 88% chance and a 100% chance at level 17. So not only do these scale in quantity, but they also scale in quality. It's great. And if you pair it with the Shield Master feat, you can basically guarantee you won't take any dex damage from that pesky fire breath. Okay, moving on to level 11. This is extra attack. Now we can attack 3 times a turn. It's one of the most loved features in the game. Alright, at level 13, we get a new feature called Studied Attacks. This means when you miss an attack against an enemy, you have advantage on that next attack against that enemy. It feels like the fighter is tactical and learning from their mistakes, and I like that. Note that if you're using a Vex weapon, you now have advantage on all your attacks, except the first. And that is pretty cool. But how much damage does this actually provide? So we normally have about a 65% chance to hit. With advantage, we have an 87.75. So on attack 1, we have a 65% chance to hit and a 35% chance to miss, which means a 35% chance that attack 2 has advantage. If we take that into account, on attack 2, we have about a 63% chance to hit. So about a 27% chance we miss. If we keep going to attacks 3, 4, 5, it basically evens out to about 71.5. So with about that much boost to our accuracy, we gain 0.68 damage per attack. With 4 attacks, that's about 2.7 damage per round. Okay, this cough is killing me. So we deal 2.7 damage per round more using studied attacks. That's not bad. I also have it filled out for a bunch of other ACs as well, and we can see that that differs. But what if we have a magic weapon? How does that interfere with it? Well, let's scoot on over to this table, because now we have an increased chance to hit, so studied attacks doesn't help as much. Now we have about 0.5 damage we gain per attack, So with 4 attacks, turns into 2 damage per round. So yeah, it does go down a bit with magic weapons. I think players will like this because it feels like you get something out of missing. Okay, we've already talked about everything else they're going to gain up until level 19. This is where we gain our epic boon. Of course, you can choose any boon you like, but the one that's suggested in the fighter class is Boon of Combat Prowess. This means once per round, you can turn any attack from a miss into a hit. This actually pairs very well with fighter, because we have so many attacks, we're very likely to miss at least one attack. So if we have a 65% chance to hit over 4 attacks, that means we have an 82% chance that at least one attack will miss. That means 82% of the time, we can increase our DPR by 1 full attack. As AC increases, we're more and more likely to miss. So then our DPR gains actually go up. So if we have a Halberd and Great Weapon Master, that means we would deal 13.6 more DPR. That's a huge gain. Again, if we add a magic weapon into the mix, this time I'll do a +3, our damage is going to go down because we're a lot more likely to land every hit on the attack. Now, if we're attacking the same AC as before, we have about a 60% chance that one attack will miss. That turns into 9.7 DPR gain. Still pretty good. And our level 20 feature, our fighter capstone, is we get an extra attack. So now we can attack 4 times with each of our attack actions. You can't say no to that. All right, now let's build a fighter and see what their damage, durability, control, and their mental resistance look like. So I want to try to build the stereotypical fighter, but the problem is there's so many different types of fighters out there that are viable. You could have a 2-weapon fighter, you could have a polearm master, you could have a sword and a shield, throwing weapons, archery. There's so many good options. For this one, I'm gonna go polearm master. I'll leave sword and board for paladin and the other fighting styles for other martials later. But the fact that they could be any of these styles is just a testament to the flexibility of the fighter. All right, in 2024, we get a starter feat. I'm gonna take tough. Best starter feat out there, I think, numerically. So we're gonna take that. I'll be using a glaive. This is a polearm, reach of 10, and it has the graze mastery, meaning I deal damage even when I miss. At level 4, we'll take polearm master feat. This boosts our strength to an 18 and lets us use a bonus action attack on our turn. That bonus action attack is still the graze property, so we can graze on that too. We also get a reaction attack from that, we'll say 25% of the time, so once a combat. At level 6, we'll take the Great Weapon Master feat. Then at level 8, we'll take Slasher. This maxes out our strength to a 20. We're 3 feats in, and we've already gotten 3 great abilities, plus maxed out our strength. This is pretty great compared to 2014 already. Now, take a look at this side of the table here, the graze damage. What I'm doing is I'm calculating the chance that we miss multiplied by the damage we get on that miss. So it increases as our strength mod goes up and as the number of attacks we get goes up too. We will see it go down later as our chance to hit increases. All right, at level 12 for our ASI, we've already maxed out our strength. We're gonna have to pick up some defensive stuff, I guess. So we'll pick up Resilient Dex here. This will help reduce a significant portion of damage coming our way. Then at 14 and 16, we'll boost our Con, and then at level 19, we'll get the Boon of Combat Prowess. If we take a look at the DPR here, we can see significant bumps along the way as our damage increases. I actually take all those DPRs and convert them into combat space. What this means is if you did that DPR, what percentage of a deadly encounter would you take out with that damage? The idea is that it's how powerful you feel in combat. What we want to see is a flat line across, so that they feel powerful at the beginning and feel powerful at the end. To get that though, you have to increase your damage per round every level to make up for the new monster HP. So far, nobody's gotten there. Now back to our damage, we see that increases at level 4, 5, and 6 as we're getting Polearm Master, Extra Attack, and then Great Weapon Master. So these are our biggest contributions to damage through our career. Because Great Weapon Master scales with our proficiency, we do get boosts to that steadily as we increase in levels. And that's really helpful. But the other big boosts we get are at level 11, which is when we get our 3rd Extra Attack. At level 13, Studied Attacks does actually increase our damage a little bit, and that helps keep us pretty stable. We start decreasing, but then at 19, that Boon of Combat Prowess boosts us up quite a bit. And then we get our 4th Extra Attack at level 20. So all in all, this line actually is looking really even. I'm going to put a trend line on here just to see what it actually looks like. And oh man, that is increasing. We are actually getting more powerful, going up in levels. That is a first for a martial, I think, not including subclasses. I do want to note that fighter subclasses don't really add to damage a ton. It's usually more about versatility. Okay, let's take a look at 2014. We're going to do a very similar build. Great Weapon Master here is different, so we decrease our chance to hit by quite a lot, but thankfully the damage is higher. So at level 4 we do Polearm Master, Great Weapon Master, Slasher at 8. Now we only have an 18 strength, so we need to use our next ASI at 12 to finally max our strength. Now we don't have enough feats to do all of the other stuff that they do in 2024. So at level 14 we'll take Tough, which they had as a starter feat. Then at 16 and 19 we'll boost our Con. So we are actually 2 feats behind 2024. We don't have Resilient Dex and we don't have that Epic Boon. Now let's take a look at this damage curve. The DPR is a lot flatter. After we get extra attack and cap our strength, we don't get any boosts to our damage until level 20. Yeah, if I put a trend line on this one, it ends up being negative slope. Okay, so overall, the damage in 2024 is much higher, and a decent amount of that comes from Graze. We do see, however, that Graze damage does go down from studied attacks, and from combat prowess, because we're turning that miss into a hit. But I stuck to that just to make this build simple. You see what I mean though about Weapon Master, how it would be nice if we could swap that Graze out when we do hit. So if we average out the combat space through our entire career at 2024, our average combat space is 45.2. That's almost a half of the combat by yourself. Note that this is with pre-existing monsters, so who knows how CR will change when we get the new monster manual. In 2014, our average combat space is 32.9. That means the new fighter deals 1/3 more damage than the old fighter, and that is a big bump. Alright, now let's see how much control our new fighter gets. Now, I have a method to measure control. It's not perfect, it is rough, but it's, I think, a decent approximation. What we do is we take the unconscious condition, give it a score of 100, and then we take that unconscious, break it up into all the little bits, and give all those values out of 100 as well. Then, whenever we inflict one of those little conditions, we gain that control score. And just like damage, it's based on your chance to actually land that control as well. We're going to swap out our Graze Mastery with a Topple Mastery. Topple also pairs very nicely with Fighter. In fact, I'm pretty sure you'll do more damage with Topple than you will with Graze. The problem is you'll force the DM to make so many saving throws, it might slow it down, but you'll give yourself a ton of advantage. So at level 1, we have about a 65% chance to hit, and when we hit them, there's about a 55% chance that they will be toppled. So in total, our control per round is about 10. This increases when we get extra attacks, such as from Action Surge, or from Polearm Master. Eventually, at level 8, we'll pick up the Slasher feat. We'll also be able to slow people once a turn. Once we get to level 9, we then get Tactical Master. So we'll try to topple on our first hit, and then we'll slow, and then we'll push, and then we'll sap, and then we'll loop back around once we get enough attacks. Then at 11, we get more hits so we can apply more of the masteries, and then studied attacks were more likely, and we get more and more stuff. Eventually we scale all the way up to about 30 CPR. That's not massive in any way, but it is pretty great considering you're dealing fantastic damage. If we average your CPR out throughout all the levels, it's about 21.75 CPR. Now, if you skip the Topple Mastery, you end up with much lower CPR. It only goes up to about 19, which is still okay. Compare this to 2014, your CPR was basically nothing. It all came from just the Slasher feat. And it ends up being about 2.5 CPR at the very end of your career. So comparatively, we're doing about 10 times the control as in 2014. I'll take that. Now let's jump to durability. Durability is the number of rounds you can survive if a deadly encounter is solely targeting you. We don't have a lot of changes from 2014. All of our jumps in durability will come from either the feats we picked up, because we have some extra, or it's going to come from the SAP Mastery. So in 2024, we picked up Tough and Resilient Dex. That will help us last a little bit longer. SAP will help reduce a little bit of the damage as well. In total, we'll last about 1.75 rounds now. Of course, if we took those things away, used a different mastery, took different feats, we would end up identical to 2014. Finally, I want to talk about this new parameter I want to measure on, mental resistance. It encapsulates the idea that you can overcome mental influence, something like mind control. The way I'll measure this is I'll have 3 wisdom saves. and we'll calculate how likely you are to pass each of those, and then we'll average them out. That way, if you have one autosave, it doesn't turn into a 100%. In both 2014 and 2024, we've started out about a 45% chance to pass all our wit saves. That continues going downwards and downwards and downwards until eventually we get Indomitable. Now in 2024, obviously that's really good. In 2014, it basically is a re-roll. But we have such a low chance to save already, it does almost nothing. If we look at this chart, we see that there's a large divergence in the two lines, and eventually 2024 actually hits out at 100% resistance. Now for our average resistance across the entire career, I'll take all those levels, average them out, and we end up with a 58.5 resistance. As a whole, the fighter has gotten buffs across the board. I think it's going to be a lot more fun to play in and out of combat. You have a lot of more tactical things to do, and you have things that you can actually contribute to out of combat. Their saving throws, I think, are going to become a huge part of their class identity. Well, once you get up there. That's going to be really satisfying because pretty much nobody else can do this. And you're really going to feel like that person that the enemy just can't take down. They might end up being very good tanks, especially now that you have so many features that can boost your AC throughout the entire round. They're going to be pretty good. So now we're going to begin our tier lists. We're going to be taking all the base classes and ranking them based on damage, durability, control, and resistance. The Barbarian does have a lot more control potential than this. I have tweaked some of the numbers because we're going to be using one build. The build that we did for our cleave has this much control. So we can see that in terms of damage and control, the fighter and Barbarian are pretty close. Then the Barbarian has more durability, but the fighter has more resistance. So it actually ends up pretty good. Let me know if this is too much or if some parts can be slimmed down. Next class we're going to be looking at is the Ranger. That's what people voted on in the polls, and I'm going to be doing a new poll for the one we do after the Ranger. All in all, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.